girls, children of all ages. This is At the Helm Sports. I'm your host, Derek Helm. Thank you for joining me for episode 162. Please be sure to follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave those 5-star reviews if you're watching on YouTube. Sorry there was no video last week, audio only, but we're going to dive into week 17 for you this week. So hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. In the comments section, let me know, what is your favorite upcoming game for week 17, whether it be on Saturday or Sunday? I got to say, I think I'm looking forward to the Rams and Cardinals game. Even though Kyler Murray has kind of sucked lately and it looks like Connor might not even play in that game, I do have some interest in that game. I think divisional game in a dome, I think it could be an interesting one. So that's what I'm looking forward to this week. Let me know in the comments what you think could be the best game this week. I'll tell you what wasn't. That was definitely Seattle and Chicago on Thursday night. That game was gross. Watched every second of it and really wished I didn't. But hope you had a good Christmas. Hope you had a good holiday. I most certainly did. Actually took down a 2-game slate, chopped it with 17 people, but I guess a first place is a first place, right? It was odd because it was the smallest field of any of my contests I was in. I looked at the other contests, and the worst it would have came was second. And I think in all of my other lineups or other contests, only one person had that same lineup. So it was very odd that in the smallest field, 17 other people chopped it with me, but wasn't even that chalky a lineup. But hey, a win's a win, right? So we're on the right track. We've been hitting pretty good over the past couple weeks. So hopefully we could roll that over into week 17. Having football every day, all fun and games until you look at this Sunday slate. It's pretty ugly. We have some weather coming, so we're going to dive in, see if we can find some diamonds in the rough here, and hopefully the weather doesn't screw us too bad. But the first game on the slate, we have the Jets at Buffalo. 46.5 is the total. Buffalo 9.5-point favorites at home. Could be some rain in this one, but actually going to be pretty warm for Buffalo. Might it be 50, maybe even mid-50s? So really don't think that that's going to affect things too much. So the issue here is Josh Allen obviously dealing with the broken hand. Now, how terrible is that? How long has he been dealing with it? Did they just come out and say that because he had a bad game and he's leading the MVP race? A lot of narrative-based stuff here, but I do expect him to play. Maybe he doesn't because there's maybe no reason to, but the fact that Baltimore won, they're still playing for that 2 seed, so I definitely do think that they want home field. So I would expect him to play here. I'm not really expecting him to have one of those 50-point games. Now, with that being said, the Jets defense has been terrible. Been a little bit better over the past couple weeks, but they have not been good. So Allen could put up some points in bunches here, and I don't think anybody's going to use him this week. So if he's coming in super low owned, I guess you can make a case for it at 8,500, and especially on a small slate where a lot of people are going to flock to a lot of the same quarterbacks, maybe that gets you different and maybe you can go there. Rodgers was a little bit banged up, but it looks like he's going to go. Adams hasn't been practicing, so that's a little bit sketchy. He may miss this game. If he does, I think that makes Garrett Wilson probably pretty popular, but a great play at 6,100. He's pretty cheap, has been involved, but obviously has been a little frustrated. So I could see squeaky wheel narrative. If Devontae Adams isn't there, I would expect him to get a shitload of targets here. So do like that. I love Breece Hall as well at 6,300. Had an okay game last week. Played quite a bit of him. If it is raining here a little bit, we could see him used in the passing game with some checkdowns here. So I think that would be my preferred route, is maybe a Rodgers with a Garrett Wilson or just a Breece Hall here. And then if you wanted to play Allen and bring it back with a Breece or a Garrett Wilson, I think that would be fine. But James Cook, probably a pretty good play as well. 7,200, has been heavily involved. Obviously has some touchdown upside. As far as the wide receivers go here, I don't really think that I want to play any of them. Shakir would probably be the preferred one, especially if there is some weather here. Could get some short, easy targets at 5,600, but probably would just be Allen and Cook for me, and then those guys that I said on the Jet side. But that's basically all I'd be looking at in this game. Next, we have Tennessee at Jacksonville. 39.5 is the total. Jacksonville 1-point favorites at home. This one also, I mean, we got a 50% chance of rain, maybe some thunderstorms, and then it's actually going to be windy as well. So even when it's not raining, 10 to 20 mile an hour winds. So that kind of scares me a little bit away from this game. Now, I do think there are some pieces that you can use here, but I probably wouldn't overstack it. Pollard is banged up, so if he can't go, I would expect Tajay Spears to be super chalky. I have used Spears the last 2 weeks despite Pollard playing because Pollard has been so banged up, and obviously Spears has paid off. Now it's been a lot of garbage time, late game stuff. So I don't know that you can necessarily rely on it, but at 5,400, I think he does have a little bit of upside, especially if Pollard can't go. I'd probably prefer Pollard to go like he has the last 2 weeks and maybe keep Spears' ownership down a little bit. And then Calvin Ridley, 5,500, I definitely think is in play as well. This Jacksonville pass defense is absolutely horrific. So I do think you can make a case for him there. 5,500 is cheap, probably even in play for cash there. And then Chigakonkwo has been getting a ton of targets lately. 3,600, I would expect that he will be very popular as the pay down tight end option here. And I'm definitely going to be going there this week. On the Jacksonville side, really don't love much, but obviously Brian Thomas Jr., 6,800. What are we doing, DraftKings? I mean, this guy, you could price him at 7,800 and he'd still be a great play. He has turned into an absolute monster. He is the number one by far on this team, and the offense runs through him. So I love Brian Thomas Jr. this week at 6,800. And if you wanted to bring it back with one of those three Tennessee players, I think that's fine there. As I said, I wouldn't go out of my way to overstack the game, especially if it's going to be this windy. But those guys I do actually like quite a bit there. Next, we have Vegas at New Orleans. This one, it's pretty ugly. 38 is the total. Vegas 1-point favorites on the road. Now, obviously, we're playing in a dome here, so it's one of the few games we don't have to deal with weather. So definitely got that going for us here. But other than that, I mean, there's not a ton to like. I think you can make a case for Abdullah 5,100. Just in PPR scoring, so heavily involved in the passing game. So I think it gives him a safe floor. And he's showing a little bit of a ceiling. I don't think he's going to break a slate, but at 5,100, you really don't need him to. So I definitely think he's in play here. Jacoby Myers, 6,000. The Saints just haven't been good defensively, so I think that's fine. And then Bowers has taken a little bit of a step back over the past couple weeks, but 6,700 for him, I definitely think is still in play. Came just shy of getting 100 yards last week. So those would be the three that I would go to on the Vegas side. As far as New Orleans goes, Rattler doesn't look good. None of these wide receivers look good. Going to be interesting to see if Valdez Scantling can go. Maybe you can make a case for him at 4,200, but then otherwise you have Dante Pettis, Kevin Austin. It's a shit show here. So maybe Juwan Johnson, 3,500, but he's banged up as well. I wouldn't mind going back to Kendre Miller. Obviously, people had some high hopes for him on Monday night. They just got annihilated, though. And I don't think Vegas is in the same caliber of a Green Bay. Now, defensively, Green Bay is not incredible, but I definitely think they're better than Vegas. So Kendre Miller, I think, should still be involved here, 5,500. I think he's a good pivot off of some of the guys that might get a little bit of ownership in that range, and maybe you can make a case for it. So maybe you could go with skinny stack, go with Miller and a Bowers, or Miller and Jacoby Myers, but that would probably be all I'd be looking at here. Next, we have Carolina at Tampa Bay. This one, I definitely, definitely have interest in. But again, here, we got some weather. We got showers on and off, basically. Chance of a thunderstorm, 10 to 15 miles an hour. So not as windy as what we're going to see in Jacksonville. Maybe the weather keeps the ownership down, because I think this would far and away be the highest owned game on the slate if there was no weather. But even with the weather, 48.5 is the total. So definitely got a high total here. Tampa Bay, 8-point favorites, basically playing for their playoff lives. Carolina has looked better here lately. So I think you can make a case here to go to some of these guys. I actually like Bryce Young, 5,600. I think he's cheap. He's played much better lately. We saw him run a ton last week. So I think that's fine. If you wanted to pair him with Thielen, 5,700, that's fine. Don't know if Legette's going to be able to go 4,400, but if you can't, Coker is $100 less at 4,300, so you make a case to go there. I would probably only pair him with one of those guys and hope that he does run a little bit. And then you bring it back on the other side with one of these running backs and or Mike Evans. And that's a pretty good game stack right there. Or obviously Baker is definitely in play here, 6,900. He's been slinging it. Evans still trying to go for that 1,000 yards. So I do expect him to get a ton of targets, and Cade Otton's out. I mean, Sterling Shepard might miss this game, or actually, no, he has been ruled out now. So it's basically McMillan and Evans. So if you wanted to pair Baker with both of them, I think that's fine. 7,500 for Evans. McMillan's only 4,600. I will say I do think McMillan with Shepard out will get some ownership. So just keep an eye on that. But I love Baker stacks this week. And I think you could even make a case to throw Rachaad White in a Baker stack, and maybe that gets you a little bit different with him, how involved he is in the passing game. But both of these running backs are absolutely in play. Bucky Irving has looked great. 6,700 is a great price for him. I mean, the guy, he's passed Connor for most broken tackles this year. Rachaad White is heavily involved, as I said, in the passing game. So either one of them are definitely in play, and I would expect them to be very, very high in ownership this week, but for good reason. So you can definitely make a case to stack this game up a couple different ways, and I'm definitely in, and hopefully the weather scares some people off, but maybe it doesn't affect the game that much. Next, we have Dallas at Philly. This one, probably a stay away for me for the most part. Again, we got rain in Philly. 10 to 20 mile an hour winds, showers on and off. 38.5 is the total. Philly 7-point favorites. I would expect that number is going to come down a little bit because it looks like Jalen Hurts is not going to pass concussion protocol. So that leaves Kenny Pickett. And we saw Kenny Pickett last year. We saw Kenny Pickett last week. Kenny Pickett is not good at football. So don't really love it here. Saquon would definitely be in play, 8,600. I think he needs just under 250 yards to break the rushing record. So if Pickett's in there, expect him to get the ball early and often. Dallas has not been good against the run. So Barkley, 8,600, although expensive, probably a very good play. Maybe the price keeps people off of him a little bit this week, but in a condensed slate, not a lot of pay up options. I could see him getting a little bit of ownership, but I wouldn't expect it to be too crazy. So he's probably my favorite play in this game. I don't really love A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith if it's going to be Pickett, so don't want to go there. Obviously, Lamb has already been ruled out, so maybe you make a case for a Brandon Cooks or Tolbert, but I don't love it. The fact that they're cheap, I think it's fine if you wanted to go with the skinny stack with a Saquon and a Brandon Cooks, but I'm really not chasing it, and the Eagles have been good defending the run, so I don't love Dowdle here. So probably really just Barkley for me, and then I'm on my way in this one. Next, we have Indy at the Giants. Now, this one, guess what? It's going to rain. Showers on and off. Not too crazy. Again, going to be pretty warm in the 50s, so not terrible. Also, it's usually pretty windy at the Meadowlands, but in the forecast, it doesn't look like anything's going to be too crazy in this one. So I think Anthony Richardson's in play. Now he's banged up. Got to make sure that he is going to play here. 5,900 for him. I think he would be fine. And if for some reason he can't go, love Joe Flacco. 4,900 against the terrible Giants defense. And again, it's not going to be overly windy. Little bit of rain, so probably still be able to throw the ball here. His pass catchers are very cheap. 4,700 for Pittman. Downs 4,800. Pierce might not be able to go, 4,700. So if he doesn't, Adonai Mitchell is only 3,800. So those guys are very affordable. Flacco, 4,900. I mean, that is a cheap, cheap stack, and you could basically do whatever you want after that. Regardless of whether Richardson goes or not, I love Jonathan Taylor against this terrible Giants defense, 7,900. Obviously coming off the huge week, so maybe some people chase that, but I think it's a great price for him, great spot, and I will definitely be playing a ton of Jonathan Taylor. On the Giants side, don't like much at all. They are terrible. They are tanking. Tyrone Tracy might not play. Malik Neighbors banged up. Neighbors would be the only one I would consider, but probably just going to go with some indie guys, and that's about it. Only 2 games in the late slate. We have Miami at Cleveland, and you guessed it, rain. Heavy at times, 15 to 25 mile an hour winds. So this could be the worst of the weather games that we see. Now, Miami 6.5 point favorites on the road. 39.5 is the total. Don't really love much here. I mean, if it's going to be a sloppy, messy game, I guess you can make a case for maybe Jerome Ford at only 5,900. But I do think that there are better running backs in better positions at his price. So I'd probably rather go there, but I think you can make a case for it here. Obviously, DTR probably starting again, so that tremendously hurts all these wide receivers. Cedric Tillman still might not be able to go. Judy's banged up as well. So if for some reason the two of them can't go, maybe you make a case for Elijah Moore at only 4,300. Njoku also banged up. So a lot to monitor as far as injuries go on the Cleveland side. Definitely want to keep an eye on that. And then there's actually injuries on the Miami side as well. Tua's a little bit banged up. Tyreek, Waddle. So got to make sure that these guys can go if you're even going to consider anything in this game. But if for some reason Waddle's out, if Tyreek's out, maybe with a banged up Tua in the rain, Devon Achane just gets tons and tons and tons of checkdowns because obviously heavily involved in the passing game as it is. So in some nasty weather, windy weather, could be even more so the case. So 7,700 for him. Weather might scare some people away, and I think he would probably be my favorite play on the Miami side. Same could be said for Jonnu Smith, especially if some of those other guys are out. 5,700 I think is fine for him at tight end based on how much he's utilized in this offense. And then next is far and away the best game on the slate. In a dome, we have Green Bay at Minnesota. 48 is the total. Green Bay 1-point favorites on the road. This should be an awesome game. I mean, you can make cases for both sides for stacking the shit out of it. Jordan Love 6,200, Darnold 6,400. The Darnold side is obviously much, much easier. You want Jefferson 8,300, Addison 6,300. You could throw Hawkinson in there 4,500. Hasn't been great, but definitely make a case to use him in Darnold stacks. So that's the easy way to go about it. The Love side, not as much, obviously. There's just a lot of mouths to feed here. Now, if Christian Watson can't go, which he hasn't been practicing, supposedly it's just a bruise on his knee, which if you saw the play, I don't know that it's necessarily a bruise. Maybe it might be something a little more, but if he can't go, then it definitely makes some of these guys a little more enticing. Jaden Reed, 5,900. Dobbs, 5,100. Wicks would get an uptick at 39. So don't hate that. And then obviously Tucker Kraft is a little bit banged up himself, but if he can go, 3,900 is a pretty good price for him. I do think that this could be a good Jaden Reed bounce back spot. Minnesota gives up big plays. So obviously if Watson can go, that's definitely in his repertoire, but Jaden Reed too. I think he could have a couple long ones in this one. So I do like him quite a bit, 5,900. And maybe with how terrible he's been lately, people are a little bit off of him. And then the running backs on each side are definitely in play as well. Aaron Jones, 6,200 is definitely affordable. Jacobs at 8,100, I think maybe keeps people away a little, but obviously we know the touchdown upside he has. He's going to get a ton of usage. Minnesota very good against the run, but they gave up some chunk plays and some yardage to DeAndre Swift a couple weeks ago. So Josh Jacobs is definitely a much better caliber running back. And if no one's going to use him and he has the touchdown upside that he has, I think you can definitely make a case for it there. So if you wanted to go with a Darnold stack, bring it back with Jacobs, I think that makes sense. Maybe it gets a little expensive if you're going Darnold, Jefferson, and bringing it back with him. But I do think that you can make a case there. And then I like I said, I think Jaden Reed would be my favorite bring back in Darnold stacks as well. Just I think the ownership's down a little bit, and I like his upside this week. But Love stacks definitely in play, and then you could bring it back with either an Aaron Jones or Justin Jefferson, or even an Addison if you really wanted to. But a lot of ways to stack this game. Definitely want to get a lot of exposure to it, but I would assume most people do, and the ownership is probably going to be pretty high on it. So that's it. 8 games, as I said, not a ton, but there are some things to like. I do think that shortened, broken up, condensed week, holiday in the middle, people not consuming as much content. I think it's going to be a lot of groupthink. People are just going to all just latch on to certain guys. So if you actually go the extra mile this week, I mean, even if you're listening to this podcast, if you do a little bit more research, I definitely think it gives you a leg up this week. So good luck to everybody. As I said, hopefully you had a great holiday, and hopefully we have a great new year coming up too. But that's going to do it for this one. As always, thank you for listening. I'm your host, Derek Helm. And remember,
just have fun out there.